we are going to talk about content going native today. We have about 45 minutes, but before we start, what I'd love to do is introduce our panelists. So let's start with you, Andy.
Hi, I'm Andy Wiedlin. I work at BuzzFeed. I've been in digital media for 15 years. Most of that time was at Yahoo, like Lee, but most recently I was at the Huffington Post.
I'm Lee Sosin. I run integrated marketing for Yahoo, and before that I ran Time Inc. Studios, which is Time Inc.'s branded entertainment, television, and video studios division.
I'm Alison Koplar-Wyatt. I'm at Refinery 29. I run our brand partnerships division, working with primarily retailers, fashion brands, as well as all of those brands on the West Coast. And I came from Elle.com, and before that, InStyle, The Knot, so I've been very much in the brand publishing world.
Hi everyone, my name is Kiyo Taga. I am the director at digital communications for Cartier North America. I've actually worked with most of these people on the panel today, so this will be a fun little talk. I've also been in the digital communication side for about 15 years, starting on the agency side, working at Coach for a few years, and doing digital at Create the Group.
Hello everyone, I'm Sebastian Atomic. I run branded content for the New York Times. I've been there for 6 months, and before that I was at Forbes for 6 years, and before that I worked at the counter at Dairy Queen. So very excited to be here. And Cartier, thankfully, was our first mobile sponsor of branded content, so we're thrilled to be on it together.
Perfect. Okay. Well, so we're all, just so we're all on the same page, let's actually start by defining what is native advertising and what is content marketing, because obviously those two are so aligned. So, Lee, let's start with you. Can you give us your definition?
Yeah, I think that you know, when you start talking about in broad terms like content marketing and native advertising, these things get so broad that they start swallowing each other up. And I think it's important to differentiate. To me, native is about the where. Right? It's about placement. It's about being aligned in whether it's in the aesthetics or the placement of the real estate that you're putting a message in. And content marketing is a strategy, and that's about the what. What are you saying? What do you want how do you want to connect with your consumers? And I think those two things, although they do overlap, and you see content marketing when it works really well, it does feel native to the experience. That native is a broader topic because it involves things like direct response and more direct selling than you get just with straight content marketing.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think of native as a tactic, and it's display, but it's not a banner. It's in the user flow. It looks more like content. But to me, it's a tactic. It's something that Google and Facebook and Twitter and BuzzFeed has been doing for the last several years. The interesting thing is when you mix native with content marketing. And that way, it's a lot more experiential, where people can find on-brand content, engage with it, and share it with their friends. And to me, that's the most powerful thing, is content that's so delightful that people will share it on a brand's behalf. And so, for the first time ever, I think you can do word-of-mouth marketing when you combine these two things.
Totally agree. So with that said, why do we all think it's so effective and important? And I think you kind of already touched on that. But you know, as a lot of you are publishers sitting here, I want to hear from Kiyo on the Cartier side, on the brand side, and really talk about why you have gotten more involved in native advertising and content marketing and what you see as those benefits.
So I guess the notion of native or advertorials in the traditional sense, it's been around for ages on the print side. Specifically in Japan, for instance, you can buy out 6-page spreads in the Vogue or Elle, for instance, and one brand owns that. The editors come in, they will create this whole beautiful story around one product or one brand, and the readers have no idea that this is paid content or sponsored content, and they really respond to this type of content because it's in the editor's voice and the POV. So that's one of the reasons why I feel from a brand standpoint it's so important, because every brand, as you know, has a story to tell, and the best way to get the story out there is to align it with a publisher or a platform that has a specific voice, that knows their audience, also knows your brand, and can integrate those together. I think that's probably one of the reasons why we've been dabbling in this space for a while. Also, what's great about digital is that it's not a flat surface, so you can integrate it through videos, in-stream ads. You can actually curate content or have editorial integration within an article. There's so many different ways that you can experiment, test and learn, and see what really responds to your specific needs. So that's one of the reasons why we really feel that it's super important. And last but not least, the metrics are really showing, especially from the brand side, for luxury specifically, when you do native content marketing, it really works. So the metrics are showing higher engagement rates, higher interaction rates, longer video views, more video views. There's just a whole lot of information that you're getting that shows you that it's working.
Definitely. So on a publisher side, I want to come back to a lot of what you said, but on a publisher side, why do you all feel like it's so important for you? And I think, Sebastian, I want to ask you that question just because you're at New York Times and there's been a lot of changes that you guys have had recently with that. So we talk about that?
Yeah, I think there's a few factors. As a publisher, one, I mean, mobile as a whole. I mean, native is a great answer to mobile. Mobile banners, I think, are just not the ideal solution for the device, and something that's in feed and frankly plays to the economics of social is crucial. And for us, on a given news day, we'll get over 50% of our traffic through mobile, so we needed a really good solution for that. Two, I mean, brands are storytellers. We need a platform for brands to be able to tap into that. I think luxury brands in particular are rooted in storytelling, and the idea that banners and storytelling marketing or more sales-based marketing and storytelling marketing would sit in the same real estate isn't really effective. And now with native, we can finally split those apart and have two different formats. And then lastly, I just think that in general, a premium publisher in particular, we have to be more creative. I think that if right now we had a do-over and got to redesign the entire digital display market, I don't think the banner is the best thing we would come up with. I think there's just new formats, and native as a whole.
I'm shocked to hear that.
It's shocking. I think it's just, it could be anything. I mean, we look at all the different pages that the Times has, and we want to come up with something creative that a brand can tap into that's not standard.
I think it's, it gets down to what the brand wants and what the consumer wants, because I feel like that's where the consumer will lead you and you need to follow it. And I don't feel that every brand has a story to tell right now, but I do feel that they're looking. And from the conversations that we've had is that brands are looking because they want to, they feel that they finally have permission to be about something greater than their products. And I think when brands start tapping into that and start accepting that permission to be able to have a different kind of conversation, then you get into a true relationship. And if you look at sort of the history of content marketing, it originally was very much a loyalty play. In fact, I actually heard a stat that the first instance of content marketing, anybody know? 1895. 1895. No, do not believe anybody who says this is a new thing. 1895, John Deere put out a magazine for people who had bought their tractors, and this was the first bit of loyalty marketing, content marketing. But now you see it as more of an acquisition tool, right? I need somebody to think about my product when they're standing in that aisle and they have 50 shampoos to choose from. How do I get them to think one molecule more about my shampoo than the other guys? And it's because there's a way for me to connect with them on a different level that will hopefully tip the scales in my favor.
I was not aware of that fact.
We did not know that.
Did not know that. Alison, can you talk to us a little bit too about Refinery 29 and how you guys have evolved into this more native and content focused effort?
Yeah, I think from the very beginning, Refinery actually, the mission was that content is content, and regardless of what flows to your page, be it advertising or content, it should be entertaining. And the reader was always sort of first in that, and we actually have a shared, it's called a business intelligence team, and every single day we're looking at data from our editorial team to see what's performing the best. What are the top searches across the site? Where are users spending the most time? Within the page itself, are they navigating more towards the images at the top? Or are they actually looking at the text at the bottom? What are they sharing? And we actually took all that information to start informing what we were doing on the advertising end of things. So I think you're seeing a real blending in the roles of editorial and advertising with the advent of really brands becoming publishers. And Refinery really wanted to sort of harness that and take advantage of the fact that now for consumers, they find inspiration in everything. Drew Barrymore actually recently wrote a book, Find It in Everything, and we recently did a study with our users who are primarily millennials on what's sort of informing their purchasing decisions. And the biggest takeaway for us was that they are literally finding it in everything. They're willing to be inspired by advertisers and the content that they're putting out the same way that they're willing to be inspired by our editorial content, which was really fascinating. But I think it presents a massive opportunity for brands to come out there and be publishers and do it with the same excellence that a publishing house would do.
Perfect. Okay, so advice-wise to the people in the room, let's talk about how you guys feel is the most effective way to work, whether, if you're a publisher, what is the best way that brands should be working with you in order to succeed? And then on the brand side, what advice would you give to those listening in the room as far as how to best make a strong relationship content-wise with some of these publishers? So I can start with you, Andy, or I can leave it open to anybody.
I would say that like we were saying, 1895, like this idea of content, social content's been around for a while. And unlike New York Times, BuzzFeed did get to do a do-over, right? So we decided not to run banners on the site. And the reason we did it is because we think brands have stories to tell. So if you're a brand and you're looking for advice, why do brands like television? Right? Because you can tell a story in sight, sound, and motion in 30 seconds, and you don't have to slam APR or product benefits. You can tell a very emotional or humorous or nostalgic story in 30 seconds. And I think that's a huge promise for native advertising and content marketing. Is the palette is so large that you don't have to be so brand focused and so sales focused. Tell a story, find what themes your brand should own, make it delightful, make it something that consumers will actually like and share on your behalf. So my advice is don't be so heavy-handed, use emotion, use it more like TV than display advertising.
You want to just...
I actually think working with fewer partners, when you're thinking about media, really evaluate who shares the sort of same common brand DNA as you do, and go and work with them in a much deeper fashion. So, at Refinery, we've actually reduced the number of partners we have had by about a fourth of the number of people we are working with, and actually increase the size of the partnerships. And that was really so that we could staff them in a way that was going to be able to be meaningful for the partners that we do have. So for Cartier, for example, we're working together and we have a dedicated team that is working on the Cartier business from start to finish so that they really have an intrinsic understanding of every single one of Cartier's needs, whether it be the subtleties of their style guide, to certain words that they don't want to be against, to the way that we're serving their ads on a page, to the sort of styling of a particular photo shoot. All of those things are sort of the soft skills that your entire team internally needs to have, and working with fewer partners is really going to be crucial to being able to have those types of relationships.
I think that's a really interesting point. The idea that native advertising can be standardized is kind of a contradiction. So the idea that you could just test a little native and run across the web, I don't think really advances a story at all. My piece of advice, beyond just running on the New York Times, would be to tell a story visually. So it takes a lot of skill to break through the clutter if you're going to write written articles. You have to be really good, and I think BuzzFeed has kind of coined that, the idea of visual storytelling. We've seen a lot of success with interactives, and our work with Cartier is very visual. And I think lastly, the idea of not being everything to everyone in one piece of content. Like, pick a goal, and as Andy was saying, find your message that associates yourself with your brand, and then find something that's interesting at the same time. So, for example, we just worked with United Airlines. They did stuff around how equipment and players get to the Olympics and back. It's a really interesting story. Readers will share it. At the same time, it's all about their brand, and it advances their metrics at the same time. And I think that a lot of the clients I talk to, I just want to say every conversation, would you read this? And if you wouldn't, then you probably shouldn't publish it.
Actually, so I'll make them short, but I have 3 pieces of advice. And they kind of touch on a lot of the things that were said before. The first is understand why you're doing it. Really why you're doing this. Why is this piece of content going to further your brand message? Is it going to help at the top of the funnel? Is it going to help at the bottom of the funnel? Really understand where you have permission and go claim that permission and understand why we're going to be in this space. That's really about the consumer, about the brand, sorry. The next piece is about the consumer. And content marketing is a value exchange. And when you think about it that way, you have to give more to the consumer than you're asking for in return, right? It can't just be about your product. If your product is the hero of the story, that's an ad. That's not content, right? But your brand can be the storyteller, and I think this is what Andy was talking about. Your brand can be the one who brings that story to you, and the one what pops into mind is P&G, their Thank You Mom campaign, or Dove Real Beauty, right? They're the storyteller, and they get all the benefit of being the storyteller that brings those stories. It doesn't have to be the mom who you see her putting Tide in the dishwasher before she, raises her Olympian.
That'd be troublesome, though.
Oh, Tide in the dishwasher?
Yeah,
that's not
a lot of bubbles.
Tide in the washing machine.
Yeah. Okay. Just a safety message
You're right.
at home.
I actually did that in college once. I didn't know much. There was literally bubbles. I'm not kidding. There was bubbles all over the floor.
Yeah, guilty.
And the third one goes to the distribution point, and that is the mindset of the consumer matters, right? We've done a lot of work because Yahoo's a massive content platform. We've done a lot of work on what is the mindset of somebody on Yahoo versus on a social network, etc. What are they coming there for? And if you understand why someone's going to Facebook versus why someone's going to Refinery 29 or Yahoo, then you're actually creating content that is designed to perform well in the environment. I don't think that content is just something you can slap around and it's going to work the same everywhere, because you're in a different mindset, and the consumer is, you have to be able to bring those things together. So the distribution, the brand, and the consumer.
Love it.
And I think on that point of adding value for the reader or the consumer, ultimately, owning topics is a really important thread that can scale. Really think about what are sort of your communication objectives, and what things do your brand stand for, and what do you want to own as a topic. And then you can identify your publishers or your media partners from there to understand, okay, do they talk a lot about that particular topic? And then on the flip side, they can also guide you in that to, we actually go and we look through what are the sort of trending topics, what does really well, what can we give to our partners to ensure that they're going to have a baseline of exposure. And then we can use that as data to sort of inform what type of topic do we want a partner to come in and tether themselves to in order to get their message out to the most possible people.
Okay, so let's talk about good content. And I would say the way that we talk about that is at first the assumption that if it's viral, it's good content. So first let's talk about why and how we think content goes viral. And then I think what we should talk about is how we can, if we should be measuring towards that, and then how we can get there. So I feel like when we talk about the virality of content, Andy's our man to answer that question. But how do we feel about that? Like, how do we have content go viral? Why does it go viral?
I think it goes to what Sebastian said. It's like we ask clients when they make content to take the Facebook test, right? And so would you want to see this content in your newsfeed? And would you click on it? And would you share it? And if the answer is no to any of those, it has no chance. But if you can create stuff that is on brand, that is delightful, that says something that the person wants to say, or it's content that expresses something about that person's personality, they'll definitely share it. And people think of BuzzFeed and silly, humorous things. It doesn't have to be funny. If your brand is not funny, don't make funny content. But things that people share stuff to build their own brand, right? So people share stuff that expresses an emotion, or shows that they're heartfelt, or shows that they're good people, or shows that goes retro, or nostalgia, or beauty hacks, or beauty tips. Anything that kind of says something positive about the person has a chance to be shared, or something that is so interesting that people want to share it to their friends. Those are the best chances of content going viral.
Agree. I would say with things like that, though, that almost has to be out there for that to happen, to be able to measure it. So how do you, just for people in the room, as a brand manager, as a leader of a brand message, how do you know that it's good? How do you know? Like, Kiyo, how do you know when you have creative that's going out there, how do you know that you think it's going to be a winner?
I think it's really important to always have that creative mindset. So whether you're an account person, whether you have nothing to do with the creative side, you're on the business side, it's really about how you feel when you watch the content or you read about the content. And we have a whole slew of historical heritage stories that we can put out there, but there's certain poignant stories that really make sense. And it's just even in a conversation piece when you're talking to people and you talk about the heritage and there's these facts about the brand that you bring up subtly and everyone says, I didn't even know that. That's really crazy that I've been a Cartier client for these many years. I had no idea that's the origin of the Panther, or that was the origin of the Santos watch. So when those stories spark that interest, that's when you know you have that nugget of information, and it's really, now how do I take this out and bring it to the people that we feel would be impressed by this? And I think it goes back to today's adventure and explorer story, but once again, you know, we're all people living this very busy life, and if there's a certain spark where you feel, wow, this is very cool about this brand, or this is how I really relate to this brand, I think that's when you know just your gut feeling, and you have to run with it, and you have to make sure it happens quick, and you have to make sure that everyone has signed off on the KPIs, because KPIs, my friends, can get you in a lot of trouble if you don't have sign off from your stakeholders, and there's all these different counterproductive conversations that could happen in terms of, oh, I wanted it to be YouTube views, oh, I thought we were looking at engagement rate, or I thought we were looking at how we're doing on Twitter. You have to really make sure that everyone's aligned before you put that content out there, and then you know whether you can measure it as a success or a failure.
I love that you brought that up. Go ahead.
Yeah, I love that point. I think it's the famous Ogilvyism, everyone should think like an editor. I think the one thing that Native has done has made everyone have to up their game on the advertising side. I think salespeople, clients, like we're all, I don't think we dreamt of working in advertising when we were 5 years old, and now I feel like we're playing the editor hat, and it's like it's just more fun, frankly. A lot of the times when we're talking about viral content, we look at events that are predictable and events that are unpredictable, and I think it's easy, for United, for example, we did a lot of deep analysis when they were doing content around the Olympics that they should publish during the Olympics. It was a very intuitive thought. There's things that go on in culture that will pop up randomly, and if you as a brand can publish around those topics, if you have the framework to do that, you can have huge success. And I think the idea is that you have to have the team in place and the mindset that you're ready once a moment happens in culture.
But I don't want to get off script because I know we're very
very funny.
Very organized. But can we talk a little bit about, in a good way, I'm not sorry, because I don't think all content is designed to go viral. And I feel like we should talk a little bit about how the sort of, the flash in the pan versus a consistent, always-on strategy of content, because I think those two things I think they can definitely live simultaneously, and they can live together. But I think that sometimes you see a lot of brands just tripping over themselves to try and do something, to try and catch the flash in the pan, or to create something that is designed to go viral. And you see it, and that's a hard bar to hit. I mean, I think you guys have done an amazing job of actually creating a methodology around that, and a brand that actually starts having meaning when it comes from BuzzFeed, that means something. And I think it's remarkable in the world that we live in. But I think there are also a lot of really great examples when you think about J&J and Baby Center, or Purina and Pet Centric, or Bank of America just did this big thing with the Khan Academy around financial knowledge and everything. That there's the type of content marketing which is about entertaining and elevating. It's the Dove Real Beauties and the Thank You Moms, and it's even Obama appearing on Funny or Die to promote Obamacare. And then you've got this entire other where it's the intent is to help and inform. Right? I want to help you live your life better. I, as a brand, have a lot of knowledge and advice to give you, and I can help you navigate this crazy world we live in. And that's an always-on strategy where each individual piece is not really designed to become, that 30 million view, but they're cumulative and they're additive, and what they do is they actually establish a stronghold and a point of view around a larger topic where you say, my brand can actually help you understand how to manage your kids better or whatever.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it's a portfolio approach, and that's what makes it fun, and that's what makes it exciting. And you might publish a bunch of pieces of content. Some might go viral, some might not. But to me, when I think about branding and word-of-mouth marketing, you think of TV, and you think of these creative agencies that, okay, we're going to put together a 30-second spot, but the entire agency has to fly to Switzerland for 3 weeks, and we're going to shoot it in HD, and it's going to cost you millions of dollars. It has to be so precious and so perfect. Where in this age of content publishing, just try stuff. Yeah. Like, we worked with Mattel, and we had a lot of misses. Like, we work with Barbie, right? Like 12 things you didn't know about Barbie. Like, who cares, right? But then we did a quiz. Like, well, which Barbie are you? And I'm hip hop Barbie, just for the record. But we got 1 million people taking that quiz, right? And so it's this portfolio, but you try a bunch of different things as long as it's on brand and as long as you're hitting the brand pillars. Yeah. It's cheap. Give it a go.
I think there's different strategies for different brands. I mean, I think when we talk to the likes of Goldman Sachs and American Express, to be fun is incredibly hard.
You don't do what Barbie?
We don't do what Barbie.
What Goldman Sachs analyst are you?
Goldman
what
Sachs
master of the universe are you? Right.
No, and I think to your point about always on, I mean, the pinnacle brand is probably MX Open Forum. They've got this always on community of small business owners going there for real advice. And one interesting strategy they took, which I think plays the whole idea of content to build a community, and then you extract data, and then you have a DR strategy. They built this community, and now they're publishing sponsored content by Amex that is sales focused into the open forum. So they've got content marketing that's going in there that's real content that readers want, and they've got sales-focused content that's driving a conversion in there. So that can be a really interesting tactic.
That's exactly the model for a Baby Center, right? If you actually go on babycenter.com, it's a J&J owned site, and you'll see ads for Target, for Pampers, for all sorts of competitors to J&J. It's unbelievable. It's actually evolved way beyond content marketing, but what it really is a CRM tool for them. Because they get they get pregnant women to sign up and say, this is my due date. And then they can start marketing to that woman all through her, before her delivery, and then over the course of the lifespan of her children as they age from infants to newborns to toddlers, et cetera, it's a CRM tool, and it's amazingly successful for them.
You just made Baby Center sound creepy, but you're.
Yes.
I'm sure you're accurate.
But it's J&J, so it's.
But
okay.
I do think, getting back to that's an always-on strategy. I do think there are ways to maximize shareability of your content, and we do a lot of tests. For example, on Facebook, on Pinterest, we do A/B testing to see what things work better. And interesting things that we've found that are great to use just as best practices is that if we put a brand in the headline, on average it works it's a quarter of as successful as if we don't use a brand in the headline or in the hashtag. So that right there says to us, okay, if we can convince the brands if you want to actually get eyeballs to your story, take your brand name out. It's not ideal, but it's a different objective of getting people to actually engage with the content that you're creating. And then it's testing images. It's looking at the headlines that BuzzFeed creates you have numbers in almost every single one of them. So sticking a number at the front and realizing that is something that there is a trend. It works better. So I think it's doing the testing, it's talking to the publishers and the partners that you work with to understand what have they seen to be successful in the past and what hasn't been. And then it's authenticity, like Kiyo was talking about. You don't have to be funny for it to be shareable. The P&G Moms campaign isn't funny, but people share it because it lifts their emotions. It touches them, and so they want to, of course, pass that along.
That was great advice. So does anybody else have any advice, either as a publisher or as a brand, as far as just little tweaks, like having numbers in there and these little things that can make a really big difference? Is there anything that you guys can think of that might be helpful for the audience?
What Alison said, I think kind of gets to trust. And I think what you're hearing here from the publisher side, at least, is that you have to trust that the publishers that you're working with understand their audiences and their platforms well. And they understand the nuances of what actually Yahoo definitely understands how to put something that clicks on the front page. They've done it they have decades of history of doing that. We understand So I'll give you a quick example. We just did a sponsorship of our new food magazine, and Nor was the original sponsor, and we created a bunch of content for them, and it was a content marketing program. And one of the things, the articles that the food editors wanted to write on behalf of Nor was Dear Mac and Cheese, a love letter. And it was all about like how much they, as foodies, we love mac and cheese. And it came, and there was a recipe at the bottom about how to make a different, some bacon-infused mac and cheese or whatever. And they're like, oh, we can't say the word cheese, we can't say the word this, we can't do that. I mean, it was all the typical brand, that doesn't hit our brief. They're like, trust us. And that ended up being the most shared piece of content, not just of that campaign, but I think there were several days where that was the most shared piece of content in the entire site. So I think trust is really like, you have to trust the people who know who this is their day in, day out.
I think that goes back to Alison's point, though, where you have to really be selective in the partnerships. Choose one or two partners that you know will work for you, work hard for you, and make sure that they not only do they understand the audience, but they have to understand your brand. So they won't come to you with recommendations that are so off-brand, although you might get the virality or the the huge uptick in social reaction or interaction, but ultimately it has to be on brand. So that's really the key to make that happy marriage, is to make sure that they understand you as well and can offer you the best that they can offer, knowing that you have certain limitations, social cultural references you can't use or you cannot use, and be able to work together. So I think a collaborative process is the most successful in any native content.
I agree. There's a collaboration because brands will always know what their brand stands for and what makes sense. And like your point, publishers know what's going to work on their site. So we just did a program with Roomba, those little vacuum cleaners, and they wanted to do 15 amazing shots of Roombas, right? Not going to work. And then if you're BuzzFeed, of course you want cats and puppies and everything, right? And that's off brand. But if you put kittens riding Roombas, then you get a viral hit. And you get the SPCA calling you. But besides that, it was a great program.
That's hilarious. Okay, so we need to talk about KPIs really quick and really talk about results, because I think that, Kiyo, you had brought that up initially, and that really is kind of that next question is, how do you, besides being viral, or even if that's important, how do you know what is doing well? What should be the main focus point as far as I don't want to say benchmark, but as far as a KPI goes, and what results are good to really even know what is a good campaign and what's not?
I think a good campaign is when you're seeing that uptick that you want to see, whatever platform that you're sending your traffic to. So whether it's your site, whether it's your YouTube channel, your Facebook, your Twitter, Instagram, whatever it is. And also the social hearing, what the conversations that are happening within the space. And there's so many nuggets of information you can get from that as well. And that can also spark another different type of content that stems off of the original content. So it's really important to have the metrics behind, and have also, the most important part is when you start any type of initiative with your publisher or your partner, have a very intense, serious kickoff call to make sure that everything is being tracked the way you want it to be tracked and measured the way that you want it to be tracked. How is it being measured? Who's doing it? Is the agency responsible? Is the publisher responsible? All that. I know this is really tactical and boring, but I think there's so many projects that we've worked on together where we patted ourselves on the back because thank God we went through that 2-hour very painful kickoff call to establish the milestones and who's the project manager and who's responsible for this and what's the deadline, and just everyone's on the same page, and that makes it seamless. So midway, you're not surprised and knowing that you weren't tracking this certain metric that was really important to you or your brand. So those are kind of the things that I would recommend.
Okay.
I would say pick one KPI that you're really focusing on, and then work with the publisher to help you design content that will lead you to that KPI. Because we've got endless data that if you throw the word hot in the headline, you're going to get 20% more views. Or if we have a scrolling slideshow, you're going to get 20% more shares. And if your goal is shares, then we'll adjust the content to do that. But when you try to create content to hit every single different success point, it's very hard to do that.
Great. Okay. Anyone else? No? Okay, let's talk about the future of native advertising and content marketing now. So obviously in digital and in this space, everything is moving really, really quickly and everything's really changing really quickly. So where do you guys see the future of this heading? And I'd love to hear from everyone.
I see the name going away.
You do?
I definitely hope the word native goes away. I feel like a dork every time I say it. Indigenous.
We're going to recoin a new term here today.
Indigenous advertising.
Indigenous
Advertising. That'd be inappropriate. I wouldn't do that.
I think, I think that brands will become smarter about the difference between content marketing and native. I think that's key. I think that we're going to get out of this phase of let's just test some native into more of like, this is what content's going to do for me. And the relationship between building a community and building data and remarketing off that, I think that's going to be a huge part of strategies going forward. And then from a publisher perspective, for us, at least at the Times, I view native as not an ad product. It's not moving the rectangle from the right side of the screen to the middle and then calling it native. That's still an ad. We view it as a philosophy. We look at every different page, every different community that's on the site, and we try to match a reader need with some unique ad experience that can deliver what a reader wants. And I think that a lot of publishers will start doing that going forward.
I think you're going to see a major shift in the structure of organizations to support native. I don't think it's native or indigenous advertising is going to go away, but it's going to become a bigger part of what every single brand is doing. But because of that, you're going to need different staffing. I think right now, digital marketing entities within companies are not staffed to support the type of opportunity that there exists with native advertising. And you really need to bring on people who think like editors. You need to, on the publisher side, we have to rethink about ourselves more as an agency model, and the sellers need to be more marketers and consultants versus sellers. They really have to have a complex understanding of the person's business that they're working with across the table. So I think you're going to see a big shift in how people are staffing and the skill sets needed from both marketers as well as the publishing side.
I hate to say it, but probably less salespeople.
Yeah.
More editors. I know.
More editors.
Who doesn't want more salespeople?
More consultants.
Yeah, I mean, we've hired so much editorial talent on the marketing side. It's incredible what they can do, just from a creativity standpoint. I mean, they bring such a different mindset for connecting a marketer and a reader that I feel like you get lost in your own marketing cocoon sometimes when you're always talking about business goals.
Yeah. I think there's going to be a bit of a convergence because right now, you have what iProspect is known for in great ads, performance marketing and analytics and KPIs. And then, traditionally you have brand and social and wackiness and things like that. And to me, with content marketing, they're sort of merging together. And instead of being a spectrum, it's almost two sides of the same coin. And if we think about it, brand has always been critical to performance marketing. It's way easier to get consumers to react to Apple than Acer, or Whole Foods to Safeway, or Cartier or Gucci to Kmart, right? So I think love brands are going to have an advantage, and I think it's going to be an opportunity for brands to build their brand online with KPIs, and it's going to really fill the middle funnel, because I think that there's better ways to do awareness. I think that iProspect has nailed the bottom of the funnel. But for the first time ever, this idea of consumer advocacy, where your consumers love your brand so much that they're advocating for you, and so they're getting their friends to consider, trial, preference, all these sort of middle funnel things that we really couldn't impact in the past are now possible because of this idea of word of mouth marketing. So that's where I think the future is going.
I agree with that 100%. What I would add on that is sort of the interplay between different tactics. So, and I think that comes from, attribution and data. So it's fun. I presented to a group from P&G the other day, and it was one of those, Yahoo Wow Summits where they're rolling all different kind of experts in different areas. And at the end, one of the brand managers stood up and he said, I love all this. Everything you said is fantastic. However, I want to just remind the room that we don't care about clicks, and we don't care about shares, and we don't care about anything. We care about selling shampoo. And when you can show me that piece of content helped me sell more shampoo, that's when you become not a marginal piece of my buy, but you become my buy. And I think that's where, when you look at the future, is being able to tie these pieces together so that And we're seeing it now. So we just did one of the sponsorships that we just ran on one of our magazines. We launched food and tech at CES, and we're launching a bunch of other digital magazines over the next couple months. And we've been running sponsorships through. And I just saw some of the results from one of the sponsorships that not only had phenomenal brand, purchase intent and brand lift and all these different great top of the funnel, but we also saw during that same time a 232% lift in brand search terms. So the interplay between how content can affect search, how content can affect performance, how content can, that's where you're going to see this coming. And it's all going to be about, being able to properly attribute credit where credit is due.
That's a great point. Okay, we have about 4 minutes left for questions. So before we open it up to anybody, does anybody have any other advice or tips that they want to share with the group that we haven't already covered?
Questions.
Or we just start with questions? Okay, let's start with questions. Anyone? Like opening it up to the audience for questions, not my questions. Maybe I wasn't clear.
To clarify.
Your stunned silence is very reassuring.
Very profound.
Being up here. Yes.
Yeah, I can jump in
Take
there.
a stab. Yeah, I mean, I think from a labeling, all the controversy with the FTC has been all about labeling. I think we view labeling as a non-issue. Let's just say it's from the brand. We're being very overt, and we'll let the quality of the content dictate the success. Unfortunately, I think The Atlantic ruined it for everybody with their Scientology piece. Sorry to any Scientologists. Apparently, they didn't want to hear from the leader of the church. And that one kind of triggered in motion this whole idea that we're tricking readers. I think that native advertising as a whole is not trickery. I think that you can do journalism poorly. I think you can do traditional advertising poorly. Just because you're doing native isn't necessarily trying to trick a reader. And as long as you're just clear, it's from a brand and you're clear about the intent, I think it's a non-issue.
Yeah, I agree 100%.
Any more questions?
Any other questions?
I think what you said, and I really liked it, the importance of the partnership and trusting the partnership. How do you guys navigate through agencies to get to the client to build that partnership? What's the healthy way? Because you guys need the agency needs you, the client needs you. What's the right way? I'm on the client side. What's the right way to forge that relationship, to break past the kind of tactical discussion?
I think agency selection is really important. I mean, I think we all wouldn't be here if we didn't respect what iProspect does, but I think something that really differentiates them as an agency is the fact that they do feel like an extension to the client versus it being a very separate entity. They take those filters on themselves that the client would otherwise have to do to understand, is a partnership with New York Times or Refinery or with Yahoo or with BuzzFeed, is that the right one? And in terms of the briefing process for the client, I think it's very important in order for the agency to be able to take on that work for you to make that a much deeper process and to start it earlier if you are going to be doing native advertising, because it really needs to be before the entire media planning process happens so that the publisher as well as the agency can get a better snapshot into what you're looking for holistically to achieve that year, and then they can go about selecting for you. And then what's been really helpful is something that iProspect does is they sort of give you top-line information that you need to know coming into a meeting to prepare so that the meeting itself is that much more efficient. So that you're not getting to it and just learning about the client's objectives. You've already prepared and come to the meeting with thought starters on what you think would be some good solutions. So it's really a brainstorm versus a learning session.
I agree with Alison that one of the most productive meetings are when every single person is in the room and you're just openly speaking about what your objectives are, what you want to achieve, and not even put any limitations to budget or timeline or any of that, and just really have this open dialogue, and I think that's where the most creative pieces come out.
Does the person with tuberculosis over there have a question? That was supposed to be funny. I hope you feel better. Yes.
Could you speak to any clients you may have had that are in a highly regulated industry, and how you've been able to sort of overcome some of their initial hesitations, like, you know, their legal compliance issues, et cetera, that sort of prevents them from really starting the conversations?
Yeah.
I feel like there's an opportunity there to talk more about the story versus the product itself. Maybe that's where you begin the conversation.
I think you nailed it right there. So I have the pleasure of working with a lot of energy companies and financial services. So Goldman Sachs was our second partner, obviously highly regulated company. One thing that I've learned is every law firm around the entire globe has to sign off on anything. So minimize changes and deliver a finished product quickly. And then secondly, I mean, you nailed it, the idea of, you know, the less you talk about the product and stakeholders at the company, the less approvals that are involved. So the idea that it would be just true content and not advertising, and you can deliver more of like a presented by the brand rather than this is, you know, from the executives at Goldman Sachs or from the executives at Chevron.
Yeah. I would say it's getting a lot easier though. We work with a lot of finance and insurance are two of our largest categories, which is insane to me. But they feel like they have a story to tell and they have brand pillars, and it's a fun place to advertise. And at first, it was a real bear to get things approved through legal, but things are getting established now. There's a lot of major players in this space of content publishing, and it's getting a lot easier to get approvals.
Yeah, but I think you nailed it. It ends up being a little bit more on the sponsorship model, because if you're able to create true edit that helps them further sort of the pillars that they care about, then it's not coming from the brand, and and they can avoid some of that regulatory nightmares. But it's tricky, and I think that it actually pushes brands to do what they should be doing anyway, which is stop talking about themselves so much and start talking about the consumer and kind of getting to that level where it really is pure content.
Yeah. And if you happen to work for a luxury brand that has a European office, I would recommend doing a lot of due diligence up front.
Okay. Any more? Maybe one more? No? Okay. Oh, one more.
So moving from legal to Google legal, given Google, Bing, and other search engines concerned about being placements, being linking, and whether or not that can be included in its index, how things can be linking, are there any kind of guidance pieces that that you or your publications are giving to customers as they're posting content?
You want to take that one?
Sorry, you got the SEO guy here.
Yeah, I'm not even sure I fully understand the question.
I think we should have Yahoo comment on Google. I think that's the most appropriate.
It's a really safe place for me to play. I'm going to plead the fifth on that. I'm not really sure I fully understand what you're asking.
So Google News does not allow paid content to flow through it. So you can actually tweak the indexing so that it doesn't flow through Google News, but it still has the benefits of search. So that's what we're doing sometimes. It depends on the type of content we're producing. So the more sponsored content, advertorial-esque it is, the less we're gonna place an SEO priority on it. So we definitely look at that.
But I mean, Google's obviously a major player, and you want to link your content to them. But in the world of social advertising, you know, the big beast is Facebook. So I'd be much more concerned about what Facebook allows to be shared in their news feed than what Google does. And just an interesting fact, Facebook, when our brands do published or social content on BuzzFeed, it's predominantly shared across Facebook. But number two is not Google or Twitter, it's Pinterest. So Pinterest has come not so much out of nowhere, but they are a massive traffic driver, especially of visual content. So, this month they're coming out with their ad product. So all you brands out there that feel like you have a story to tell and visual medium, I think Pinterest is going to be an awesome platform for you.
Yeah.
Are you selling for them too?
I'm pimping.
I was like, wait a second.
I'm pimping hard. I'm so pro Pinterest. I think it's an amazing. To me, it is it's a housewife's dream to say, okay, I love these things so much, I'm going to pin them. Market to me.
Not just housewives.
Yeah.
Well, 88% women, but I just think it's an amazing marketing platform.
Let's end on that, everybody. Thank you all so much.